Ethan sat alone in his sleek penthouse, staring out at the city lights that stretched endlessly beneath him. The skyscrapers glittered like scattered diamonds, and the hum of traffic far below reminded him that life was moving all around him, yet he felt completely still. He had everything the world said a man could want: wealth, power, influence, but the truth was he felt hollow. Meetings, contracts, and endless negotiations filled his days, leaving him with a strange emptiness that no amount of success could fill. He was a billionaire CEO, a man admired and envied by thousands. Yet he had not felt truly understood in years. Tonight, like so many nights before, he poured himself a glass of whiskey, letting the amber liquid burn its way down, numbing the familiar ache of loneliness. His assistant had been pushing him to consider blind dates, and tonight, she insisted he give it one last try. At first he had laughed it off. He had tried everything: dating apps, matchmakers, even exclusive social events for singles. But nothing had ever worked. People saw the money, the cars, the penthouse, and assumed he had everything, including love. But the truth was, love had always eluded him. He turned the glass in his hand, thinking about the countless evenings spent alone. He remembered birthdays where the only gifts he received were expensive watches or bottles of wine, carefully chosen to impress, not to show care. He remembered dinners where the only conversation was about business deals and market trends. He remembered traveling for work and sitting in lavish hotel rooms, staring at a ceiling he could barely recognize as his own, wishing someone would simply ask how he felt. Still, despite the cynicism that had built over the years, a small part of him felt a flicker of curiosity about this final blind date. His assistant had assured him it would be worth trying, and while he hated to admit it, he was tired of feeling so isolated. Maybe this time things would be different, though part of him doubted it. Meanwhile, across the city, Layla was preparing for the same blind date. She lived a modest life in a small apartment, her days filled with teaching art to children at a local school. Her students were her world, their laughter and creativity bringing her joy she rarely found elsewhere. She had a close circle of friends who knew her heart well, and they had arranged this date, insisting she give it a chance. Unlike Ethan, Layla had never been motivated by wealth or status. She valued sincerity, kindness, and genuine connection above all else. Layla stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her simple dress and brushing her hair. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Blind dates had always been unpredictable, sometimes awkward, sometimes unexpectedly wonderful. She hoped tonight would fall into the latter category. She didn't know who she would meet, only that someone would be waiting for her at the restaurant. She reminded herself to be patient, to enjoy the moment, and to be herself, no matter what. The restaurant chosen for the meeting was an elegant yet cozy place, with warm lighting that softened the edges of the room and tables spaced to allow privacy. Without feeling isolated, Ethan arrived early as usual, scanning the surroundings with a practiced eye. He had expected to see a nervous, awkward scene or someone overly flashy trying too hard to impress. Instead, he found himself waiting, fidgeting slightly, a rare feeling for a man who was usually so controlled. He had come expecting to feel nothing, but something in the anticipation made him uneasy, a strange mix of skepticism and curiosity. Layla arrived shortly after, and the moment she stepped inside, Ethan noticed her. She was not dressed extravagantly, nor did she carry the aura of someone trying to command attention. She simply walked in with a calm confidence, her eyes bright, her smile gentle. Ethan felt a jolt he had not felt in years, a spark of recognition that something unusual was about to happen. She approached the table with grace and greeted him with a polite, warm voice, and suddenly, the skepticism he had carried all evening began to fade. Their first few words were small talk, cautious and polite. Ethan asked about her day and she asked about his. But soon the conversation started to flow naturally. Layla shared funny stories about her students, about art projects gone wrong and little victories that made her laugh. Ethan found himself smiling, laughing even, something that had become rare in his life. He shared a few moments from his own childhood, memories of growing up under pressure, of always needing to achieve, of the isolation that came with success. Layla listened, genuinely interested without judgment. Her eyes reflected empathy and understanding, and Ethan realized how much he had missed having someone who truly listened. There was no pretense, no expectation, just a human connection forming slowly, naturally. He felt lighter, freer, as if a weight he had carried for years was beginning to lift. As the night progressed, their conversation moved beyond small talk. They discussed hopes, fears, dreams, and disappointments. Ethan admitted quietly that he had grown weary of the emptiness that surrounded him, that he sometimes wondered if happiness was even possible for someone like him. Layla responded with honesty, sharing her own challenges, the moments when she felt overlooked or underestimated, and the resilience she drew from pursuing her passions. Ethan was struck by her perspective. She had lived a life full of challenges, yet had maintained her optimism and compassion. He realized that wealth and success had not taught him the same lessons that life had taught her. Her presence was grounding, a reminder that connection and understanding mattered more than status or power. Time passed unnoticed. The restaurant began to empty, but they did not. Their laughter echoed softly in the quiet space, punctuated by thoughtful pauses where they simply listened to each other. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a sense of ease, a feeling that he could be himself without judgment or expectation. Layla felt it too, a sense that this encounter was more than just a blind date, that it might be the beginning of something meaningful. Eventually, the waiter approached, gently reminding them of the time, but neither was ready to end the evening. They lingered, talking quietly, savoring the simplicity of the moment. Ethan found himself marveling at the fact that a stranger, someone he had never met before tonight, could make him feel so seen and understood. Layla felt a strange warmth, a comfort she had not expected to find in a stranger, a connection that seemed to transcend the ordinary. When they finally left the restaurant, the night air felt crisp and alive. They walked side by side for a short distance, hesitant to part ways. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, wanting to express something important but hesitated, unsure of how to convey the feelings that had arisen unexpectedly. Layla sensed his pause and gently thanked him for the evening, saying she had enjoyed the honesty and warmth of their conversation. The words were simple, yet they carried weight. Ethan felt a strange flutter of hope, a feeling he had not allowed himself to experience in years. He realized that this evening had shifted something within him, that perhaps happiness and connection were not as impossible as he had believed. Layla returned to her small apartment, replaying the events of the evening, smiling at his laughter, the way he had shared pieces of himself, and the rare vulnerability he had shown. Both walked away with something precious, something intangible yet deeply felt. Ethan, the lonely billionaire CEO, had discovered that even in a life filled with material success, the human heart still longed for understanding, laughter, and genuine companionship. Layla, the modest art teacher, had experienced the possibility of connection in its most authentic form, a reminder that kindness and openness could create unexpected bridges between two very different worlds. As they each settled into their separate spaces, neither could ignore the impact of the night. A spark had been lit, subtle but undeniable, and both sensed that this encounter was only the beginning. For Ethan, it was a reminder that life could hold surprises beyond the boardroom, beyond contracts and profit margins. For Layla, it was a moment that suggested that hearts could meet in places least expected, in ways that transformed ordinary life into something extraordinary. The city outside continued its endless hum, indifferent to the quiet shift that had occurred in two lives above its streets. Yet within Ethan's penthouse and Layla's modest apartment, something significant had begun, a first step toward connection, a fragile but promising start to a story neither had anticipated, a story that might just change everything. The day after the blind date, Ethan woke earlier than usual, a strange restlessness keeping him awake before the alarm even rang. Normally, mornings were routine, a quick workout, scanning emails, reviewing schedules. But today his mind drifted back to the previous night. He remembered her laugh, so genuine and unforced, the way she had listened with interest when he spoke, the warmth in her eyes that seemed to notice the parts of him no one else ever did. He sat on the edge of his bed sipping his coffee and felt something he had not experienced in a long time: anticipation. Layla, too, found herself thinking about the evening. She went about her morning routine, pouring tea, arranging her small breakfast, and preparing for her day at the school. Yet her thoughts kept returning to him. She smiled, shaking her head at herself. It had been just one night, a meeting of strangers, yet she could not deny the connection she had felt. There was something about him that went beyond the surface, The kindness he had shown, the way he had spoken so honestly about his life, and the unexpected moments of humor and humility that made him feel real, not like the distant, untouchable figure she had imagined a billionaire might be. Ethan's assistant called mid-morning, reminding him of his schedule, but he only half listened, distracted by the memory of her presence. He had expected to feel awkward or bored after a blind date, perhaps even relieved that it was over. But instead, he felt a pull he could not ignore. He found himself checking his phone for messages she might have sent, though none had come yet. The thought of reaching out made him hesitant. He did not want to appear desperate or impatient, but the emptiness he had felt for so long now seemed sharper, and he realized he wanted to hear her voice again, to share even small pieces of his life. Across the city, Layla's day unfolded with its usual rhythm. She greeted her students with cheerful smiles, guided them through their painting lessons, and marveled at their creativity. Yet her mind wandered. She replayed moments from the dinner, the way he had leaned back in his chair, relaxed, as though the weight of the world had been lifted for a few hours, or the way his eyes had flicked with interest when she mentioned her favorite painters. She wondered if he was thinking about the night as much as she was, if he felt the same spark of curiosity and connection that she did. By mid-afternoon, Ethan could no longer resist. He picked up his phone, hesitated, then typed a message that he reread multiple times before sending. It was simple, respectful, and curious. "I enjoyed our conversation last night. Would you like to meet for coffee sometime this week?" He pressed send, feeling a mixture of hope and apprehension. Layla's phone buzzed just as she was walking through the school courtyard. She looked down, saw his message, and felt her heart lift. She smiled widely, quickly typing back, "I'd like that. How about Thursday afternoon?" A few moments later, Ethan replied, confirming the time and place. Both hung up, a quiet excitement lingering in the air, an unspoken anticipation of what was to come. The next few days were a mix of routine and subtle tension. Ethan threw himself into work, but even meetings and calls felt different. His mind would wander, imagining what she might be doing, how her smile would light up the coffee shop, or how her laughter had lingered in his mind. He caught himself checking the clock more often, wondering if the day had gone by quickly enough to meet her again. Layla, meanwhile, carried on with her teaching but found herself sketching quietly during breaks, thinking of the conversations they had shared. She replayed his stories, laughed quietly at the humorous moments he had recounted, and marveled at the way he seemed to open up, despite the obvious walls he carried from years of responsibility and isolation. When Thursday arrived, both felt a strange, nervous energy. Ethan arrived at the coffee shop early, scanning the entrance repeatedly. He had learned to be self-assured in the boardroom, confident in every decision, yet this was different. Here there was no agenda, no financial strategy, no power play, just two people hoping to connect. The simplicity of it unsettled him in the best way. Layla arrived a few minutes later, her calm demeanor contrasting with the fluttering excitement she felt inside. Ethan noticed her immediately, and again, there was that spark of recognition, that moment where the world seemed to pause. They greeted each other with a simple smile, a quiet acknowledgement that last night had mattered, and that tonight might matter too. They ordered coffee, small pastries, and chose a table by the window, where the late afternoon sun filtered in softly. The conversation began gently, with updates about the past few days, small stories and observations about the city. Yet as they talked, it quickly deepened. Ethan found himself sharing moments of his childhood he had never mentioned to anyone, how he had often felt unseen, even in a crowded room, how the pressure to succeed had shaped his relationships, and how loneliness had become a familiar companion. Layla listened with care, responding with empathy rather than judgment. She shared her own experiences, moments of doubt, struggles to make ends meet, and the joy she found in nurturing her students' talents. Their exchange was fluid, natural, and honest. For Ethan, it was a revelation to speak so openly without fearing vulnerability. For Layla, it was a rare glimpse into the world of someone who lived so differently, yet carried similar emotions, hopes, fears, and a longing for genuine connection. Hours passed unnoticed. The coffee cooled in their cups, but neither seemed to mind. They laughed at small things, shared quiet reflections, and even fell into moments of silence that were comfortable rather than awkward. Ethan realized he was enjoying being present in a way he rarely had, and Layla felt a similar sense of ease. The walls they had both carried began to soften, brick by brick, as conversation and shared understanding built a fragile but steady bridge between them. As the sun dipped lower, casting a golden hue over the street, Ethan suggested a short walk. They strolled through the quiet city streets talking about art, architecture, and memories of places they had visited. Ethan noticed how she observed small details, how she paused to admire a mural or comment on a flower blooming by the sidewalk. Her perspective was refreshing, a reminder that life was not just about schedules and obligations, but about noticing and appreciating the small, often overlooked moments. Layla noticed changes in him too. He laughed more freely, walked with a lighter step, and seemed to genuinely engage with the world around him rather than merely passing through it. She felt a warmth in his presence, a rare combination of strength and gentleness that made her heart feel unusually light. For the first time, she imagined the possibility of a life where connection and understanding were not fleeting, where someone could truly see her. They stopped at a small park, sitting on a bench as evening fell. The streetlights flickered on, casting soft pools of light around them. They spoke quietly now, almost in whispers, sharing thoughts they had never voiced before. Ethan admitted that he had rarely allowed himself to hope for something real, something beyond the walls of wealth and expectation. Layla shared her own doubts, her fear that moments like this were too good to be true. Yet in their shared vulnerability there was trust. The night ended reluctantly. They walked back toward the coffee shop where their day had begun, each aware of the tension between wanting to linger and knowing they must part. Ethan hesitated before saying goodbye, struggling to put into words the way he felt. Layla, sensing his pause, smiled gently and thanked him for the day, for the honesty, for the laughter. Her words were simple, but they carried weight, and Ethan felt a warmth spread through him that he had not felt in years. After parting, both returned to their respective lives, yet neither could shake the impact of the day. Ethan reflected on how much he had enjoyed simply being in her presence, the way she had seen him for more than his wealth, and the way she had listened without expectation. Layla replayed his stories, his laughter, and the subtle kindness he had shown, wondering how someone so different from her could feel so familiar. The days that followed were filled with messages and calls, small exchanges that deepened their connection. Ethan sent thoughtful notes about things they had discussed, and Layla responded with curiosity and warmth. Each interaction built trust and familiarity, slowly turning a simple blind date into a meaningful bond. As the city moved on, unaware of the subtle story unfolding in its midst, Ethan and Layla discovered that connection could emerge in unexpected ways. Two lives, separated by wealth, circumstance, and experience, were beginning to intertwine through shared honesty, empathy, and a growing sense of hope. They were learning that vulnerability was not weakness, that attention and care could bridge worlds, and that sometimes the simplest meetings, like a coffee and a walk, could be the start of something extraordinary. Evening after evening, each thought of the other with quiet anticipation. Ethan no longer felt the emptiness that had so long been his companion. Layla no longer doubted that someone could truly see her. And in this space between routine and possibility, the story of their lives was beginning to shift, slowly, gently, toward a shared path neither had expected, but both now secretly hoped to follow. Ethan could hardly focus at work that week. Normally, his office was a place of control and sharp decisions, where every meeting and call demanded his full attention. Yet now, even sitting at the head of the long conference table, he found his mind wandering back to the evenings he had spent with Layla. Her voice, soft yet confident, replayed in his head like a melody he could not shake. He remembered the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about her students, how she described their art projects with genuine pride and joy. The memory brought a rare warmth that made him smile without realizing it. He had always considered himself a private person. The world saw the billionaire, the CEO, the man who never faltered under pressure. But here was someone who had managed in just a few short days to make him feel seen. Not for his wealth, his achievements, or his status, but for the parts of him that had long been hidden. That was something he had almost forgotten existed. Across the city, Layla felt the same pull. Her days were filled with students, paints, and brushes, yet her thoughts frequently drifted to Ethan. She remembered the way he had laughed, the subtle gestures he made, and the moments where his guard had slipped to reveal glimpses of vulnerability. She could not help but wonder what he was thinking, if he felt the same curiosity, the same spark that she did by midweek. They had fallen into a routine of casual messages, small greetings, observations about the day, comments on things they noticed. Each message carried a weight of anticipation and subtle excitement, a careful way of keeping the connection alive without rushing it. Ethan found himself carefully crafting his words, wanting them to feel thoughtful but not forced. Layla responded in kind, her messages warm and expressive, reflecting the same gentle curiosity he felt. On Thursday evening, they arranged to meet again, this time at a small art exhibit Layla had been eager to visit. Ethan arrived first, taking a moment to look around the gallery. The walls were lined with paintings, each telling a story of its own. Yet none of them could compare to the story unfolding in his mind, the one about the connection that had begun between him and a woman he barely knew, but already admired deeply. Layla arrived shortly after, her presence immediately grounding him. She greeted him with a smile, and he noticed the slight tilt of her head, the way her eyes sparkled with curiosity and warmth. The familiar comfort of last week's conversation returned instantly, though now there was a deeper sense of anticipation, a silent question of where this connection might lead. As they walked through the exhibit, they shared thoughts on the paintings, the techniques used, and the emotions each piece evoked. Ethan noticed how attentive she was, how she observed details that most people overlooked. He admired the way she expressed her opinions without hesitation, without fear of being judged, and he realized how much he valued her perspective. Layla, in turn, noticed the subtle changes in him. He seemed more relaxed, less guarded, willing to share opinions and feelings he had kept hidden for years. She saw the man beneath the surface, the person who had been shaped by pressure and success but who still carried a capacity for kindness, humor, and genuine curiosity. She felt a growing admiration, not for his wealth but for the way he engaged with the world and the quiet depth she sensed within him. They moved to a corner of the gallery where an interactive installation encouraged visitors to write messages about their experiences. Ethan hesitated at first, unsure what to contribute, but Layla's encouraging smile nudged him forward. He wrote a simple note about the importance of noticing small joys, of appreciating moments that often went unseen. Layla added her own thoughts about hope and connection, and together, they laughed at the contrast between their handwriting and perspectives, enjoying the simple collaboration. After the exhibit, they stepped outside, and the evening air was crisp and refreshing. They walked along the quiet streets, talking about their childhoods, the places they had lived, and the small moments that had shaped them. Ethan spoke about growing up with high expectations, of learning to hide his fears behind a mask of confidence. Layla shared her memories of humble beginnings, of finding beauty and joy in small things, and of the resilience she had cultivated along the way. With each step, their conversation deepened, moving beyond the surface into realms of honesty and understanding. They discussed dreams they had once considered impossible, fears that they rarely voiced, and the longing for connection that had shaped their lives. Ethan felt a growing sense of relief, as if a burden he had carried for years was gradually lifting. Layla felt a rare sense of recognition, a feeling that she had found someone who truly understood her, even without knowing all the details of her life. At a quiet park along their walk, they paused near a small fountain. The water sparkled under the soft glow of streetlights, and the moment felt intimate and suspended in time. They spoke softly, almost in whispers, about the unexpected nature of life and the ways people could cross paths when least expected. Ethan admitted cautiously that he had not imagined finding someone like her, someone who could make him feel both comforted and curious at the same time. Layla admitted similar thoughts, expressing the surprise of discovering a connection that felt both exciting and grounding. As they continued their walk, they stumbled upon a small bakery that was just closing for the night. They laughed at the timing but decided to peek inside, drawn by the warm aroma of bread and pastries. Inside, the baker greeted them kindly, and they bought a small assortment to take with them. They stepped back onto the street, sharing a pastry and laughing quietly at their shared enjoyment of simple pleasures. Ethan realized that moments like these, unplanned, small, and genuine, were what he had been missing all along. Layla noticed how he savored these ordinary experiences, how he seemed present in the moment rather than thinking about schedules or obligations. She felt a warmth in her chest, an appreciation for the way he allowed himself to engage with life differently when he was with her. She realized that the connection between them was growing, not through grand gestures, but through shared presence and authenticity. As the night deepened, they walked back toward the gallery area, reluctant to end their time together. Ethan wanted to extend the evening, to continue talking, to keep discovering the layers of her personality that fascinated him so much. Layla felt the same hesitation, wishing for more time to linger in the warmth and ease of his company. When they finally paused outside her apartment building, they stood quietly for a moment, neither wanting to break the spell of the evening. Ethan hesitated, unsure how to express the depth of his feelings without overwhelming her. Layla, sensing his pause, smiled gently and thanked him for the evening, for the laughter and for the moments of honest conversation. Her words were simple, yet they carried weight, and Ethan felt a quiet sense of contentment, mingled with the growing hope of something deeper. After she disappeared inside, Ethan walked back to his car, replaying the events of the evening in his mind. He marveled at how easily conversation had flowed, how natural the connection felt, and how profoundly he had enjoyed simply being with someone without pretense or expectation. He realized that for the first time in years he looked forward to what might come next, rather than dreading the emptiness of another evening alone. Layla, in her apartment, unwrapped one of the pastries and savored it slowly, thinking about the quiet moments they had shared, the laughter, the honesty, and the subtle intimacy that had grown between them. She felt a sense of possibility, a delicate but persistent hope that this connection could lead to something meaningful. She smiled at the thought, realizing that her life had shifted in a way she had not anticipated, all because of a man she had met on a blind date. The following days were filled with continued exchanges of messages, each one deepening the bond between them. They discussed favorite books, films, and memories, finding delight in shared interests and the differences that made their conversations richer. Ethan found himself anticipating each message, each reply, as though the simple act of communication with her could brighten the most ordinary day. Layla felt the same, noting the subtle ways he remembered details about her life, the thoughtful questions he asked, and the quiet attentiveness he showed even through small gestures. By the end of the week, they arranged another meeting, this time at a small cafe known for its quiet charm and rustic ambiance. Both felt a mixture of excitement and nerves as they approached the meeting, a sense that their connection was evolving into something tangible. Ethan arrived first, scanning the cafe, and Layla soon appeared, walking in with the same calm confidence that had captured his attention from the beginning. Their conversation flowed as naturally as ever, moving seamlessly from trivial matters to deeper reflections. They shared stories of past relationships, moments of vulnerability, and glimpses of the hopes and fears they rarely voiced. Ethan found himself opening up more than he had with anyone in years, and Layla felt a profound sense of trust and appreciation for the man sitting across from her. Hours passed unnoticed, and as evening fell, they walked outside together, feeling the cool air against their skin. They spoke quietly about dreams, desires, and the possibility of building something meaningful together. For both, the world seemed to shrink around them, leaving only the shared space between their hearts and the growing understanding that had begun to form. By the time they parted that night, both knew that their connection had deepened in a way neither could ignore. Ethan returned home with a quiet joy, reflecting on the shift in his life and the way her presence had begun to fill the emptiness he had carried for so long. Layla, too, felt a sense of fulfillment, a recognition that something extraordinary was unfolding, a bond built on authenticity, laughter, and mutual understanding. And so the story of their lives continued, slowly and deliberately, as they explored the possibility of connection, learning that the simplest gestures, honest conversations, and shared moments could bridge even the widest divides between two very different worlds. Ethan woke that morning with a quiet sense of anticipation. Normally, he would have jumped straight into his routine, scanning emails and planning meetings, but today he allowed himself a moment to breathe. The night before had been different from all the others. Walking with Layla, Sharing laughter and quiet reflections, he had felt a warmth that seemed to settle deep inside him. He poured his coffee and stood by the window, watching the city come alive beneath the soft morning light. For the first time in years, he did not feel the emptiness that had so long accompanied him. Layla across the city was preparing for her day with similar thoughts. She dressed carefully, though not for appearance but for the feeling of confidence that came from presenting herself as she was. Her students would greet her with smiles and energy, but she carried an extra glow that morning, a quiet joy born from the connection that had begun with Ethan. She paused briefly, staring out of her window at the streets below, thinking of him, and wondered what the day would bring. Their messages during the morning were brief but filled with warmth. Ethan sent a small note mentioning a book he had recently started reading, and asked her if she had ever come across it. Layla replied almost immediately, sharing her thoughts on the book and her favorite parts. The exchange was casual, yet it carried the weight of mutual attention, the feeling of two lives slowly intertwining. By mid-afternoon, they arranged to meet at a quiet park known for its walking paths and small fountains. Neither had been there before, and both appreciated the thought of a neutral space away from the noise of the city where conversation could flow naturally. Ethan arrived first, leaning casually against a tree and taking in the surroundings. He felt a familiar mix of nerves and excitement, a sensation that had become increasingly rare in his life. Layla arrived moments later, and he noticed the way she moved with a natural ease, unhurried and comfortable in her own skin. She smiled at him, and in that smile he felt a connection that reached beyond words. They greeted each other warmly, exchanging small pleasantries before beginning their walk along the winding paths of the park. As they walked, conversation flowed effortlessly. They spoke of the city around them, the small details people often overlooked, and the memories those streets evoked. Ethan found himself sharing stories of his childhood, tales of small adventures and lessons learned that shaped the person he had become. Layla listened attentively, responding with thoughtful questions that revealed her genuine interest in understanding him beyond the surface. Layla shared stories of her own past, of summers spent exploring nearby forests, of early mornings painting by the riverside, and of moments when she had felt invisible yet resilient. Ethan was struck by her honesty, the way she did not shy away from expressing vulnerability while maintaining strength. He realized that her presence was not only comforting, but also inspiring, a reminder that connection and authenticity were more powerful than wealth or status. They paused near a small fountain, watching the water ripple and glint in the sunlight. The moment felt suspended, quiet yet charged with meaning. Ethan noticed the subtle gestures she made, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gentle way she examined the fountain's details, and felt a deep appreciation for the simplicity and genuineness of her presence. Layla, in turn, observed the way he relaxed in her company, the rare moments when his usual composure softened, revealing glimpses of warmth and humor she had not seen elsewhere. As they continued their walk, the conversation shifted to dreams and aspirations. Ethan spoke about his hopes for the company he led, the vision he had cultivated over years of hard work, and the personal goals he rarely shared. Layla shared her dreams for her students, the desire to inspire creativity and confidence, and her quiet ambitions to make a meaningful impact in her community. They discovered common ground in the importance of purpose, the drive to contribute, and the search for fulfillment beyond material success. Hours passed without notice. The sunlight began to wane, casting long shadows across the paths, yet neither seemed eager to leave. They found a quiet bench under a large oak tree and sat, speaking softly, almost in whispers, about moments of vulnerability and courage. Ethan admitted that he had rarely allowed himself to hope for something personal, something real due to the demands of his life and the walls he had built. Layla acknowledged her own cautiousness, admitting that trust had to be earned and that meaningful connections were rare. Their conversation deepened further as they shared fears and uncertainties. Ethan spoke of the loneliness that had accompanied his achievements, the difficulty of finding someone who could understand him beyond his public persona. Layla shared moments of self-doubt, times when she questioned her own path and the challenges of balancing personal dreams with everyday responsibilities. In their exchange, there was no judgment, only empathy and understanding. As evening fell, the park took on a serene atmosphere. The lights along the paths flickered on, casting gentle glows on the foliage. They walked slowly, savoring the quiet beauty around them. Ethan noticed the comfort of her presence, the way she seemed to bring out a side of him that was relaxed, reflective, and open. Layla felt a similar sense of ease, the reassurance that she could be herself without pretense or expectation. They stumbled upon a small cafe at the edge of the park, its windows glowing warmly. They decided to step inside, drawn by the inviting aroma of coffee and baked goods. Inside, the atmosphere was cozy, with soft music and gentle lighting creating an intimate space. They ordered drinks and found a quiet corner to sit, continuing their conversation. Ethan shared small anecdotes from his work, the humorous moments and the challenges alike, and Layla responded with genuine curiosity, asking questions that revealed her thoughtful engagement. They laughed together, occasionally pausing to reflect on shared experiences and perspectives. The conversation was easy, flowing naturally, with moments of silence that were comfortable rather than awkward. As the night deepened, they left the cafe and walked back through the quiet streets. Ethan felt a growing awareness of his feelings, a recognition that his connection with Layla was evolving into something meaningful. He noticed how her presence seemed to make the world feel softer, more approachable and more alive. Layla felt the same sense of connection, appreciating the way he listened, engaged, and shared himself without pretense. Before parting, they stopped at a small bridge overlooking a gently flowing river. The reflections of city lights danced on the water, creating a scene of quiet beauty. Ethan hesitated, unsure how to express the depth of his feelings, and Layla, sensing his pause, smiled gently and thanked him for the day, for the moments of laughter, and for the honesty of their conversations. The words were simple, yet they carried weight, and Ethan felt a warmth spread through him, a rare sense of contentment and hope. After she disappeared into her apartment building, Ethan walked back slowly, replaying the evening in his mind. He reflected on the laughter, the quiet moments, and the shared vulnerability. For the first time in years, he felt a genuine anticipation for what the future might hold, a sense that meaningful connection was not only possible but unfolding before him. Layla, in her apartment, set her bag down and sat by the window, gazing at the city lights. She thought about the subtle gestures, the shared reflections, and the ease of being with him. A quiet hope settled in her heart, a sense that something extraordinary was taking shape between them, built on mutual respect, understanding, and the rare ability to connect authentically. The days that followed were marked by continued communication, messages exchanged throughout the day, small check-ins, shared observations, and quiet expressions of care. Ethan found himself looking forward to each interaction, whether brief or extended, appreciating the way she engaged with him and how she inspired him to see the world differently. Layla cherished the attentiveness, the thoughtfulness, and the warmth that radiated from his words and actions. They planned another meeting for the following week, choosing a quiet bookstore where they could explore their shared love of literature and ideas. Both approached the day with anticipation, eager to continue discovering the layers of each other's personality, hopes, and dreams. As they prepared, the quiet joy of connection settled over both of them, a subtle but persistent reminder that life could offer unexpected moments of meaning and intimacy. Ethan arrived early, taking in the smell of books, the quiet hum of conversation, and the soft rustle of pages. He felt a familiar, nervous energy, yet it was tempered by the comfort of knowing that this time the anticipation was mutual. Layla arrived shortly after, her smile brightening the room, and he felt the familiar spark of recognition and connection. They greeted each other warmly, and together, they began to wander the aisles, discussing authors, favorite passages, and ideas sparked by the books they encountered. Hours passed unnoticed. Their conversation meandered through topics of art, philosophy, personal reflections, and memories. Ethan shared more of his childhood experiences, moments of triumph and regret, while Layla revealed small, formative experiences that had shaped her perspective on life. With each exchange, their bond deepened, a subtle understanding forming that went beyond words, a recognition of shared humanity and empathy. By the time they left the bookstore, night had fully fallen. The streets were quiet, illuminated by the soft glow of streetlights. They walked together, savoring the simple joy of shared company, and paused at a small cafe to grab a late-night snack. They sat quietly, sipping tea, enjoying the warmth of the room and the comfort of each other's presence. As they parted that night, both felt a sense of anticipation and hope. Ethan returned home with a quiet joy, reflecting on the evolution of their connection and the way it had begun to fill the emptiness he had long carried. Layla, too, felt a sense of fulfillment, recognizing that their relationship was building on trust, understanding, and the subtle, shared moments that mattered most. The week closed with a quiet certainty that something extraordinary was unfolding. A bond formed not through grand gestures or dramatic events, but through simple presence, genuine conversation, and mutual understanding. Their lives, though different in many ways, were converging in a space of authenticity and connection, creating a story neither had anticipated but both were beginning to cherish deeply. Ethan woke that morning with a quiet anticipation he had not felt in years. The city outside his window glimmered under the rising sun, but he barely noticed the streets and skyscrapers. His thoughts were filled with Layla, her laughter, her calm confidence, and the easy way she had become a part of his life over the past few weeks. Normally, mornings were about schedules, emails, and meetings, but today felt different. Today, he wanted to focus on something more meaningful, something that reminded him of why he had started looking for connection in the first place. Layla, too, woke with a similar feeling. Her small apartment felt warmer than usual, though the chill of early morning still lingered outside. She moved through her morning routine, quietly humming to herself as she prepared for the day. Her mind kept returning to Ethan, how natural it felt to be around him, the way he listened so attentively, and the way their conversations had begun to feel like an essential part of her days. The anticipation was not anxious but filled with hope. The sense that life had subtly shifted and something special was unfolding. Messages were exchanged as usual, small and thoughtful, but today they carried more weight. Ethan suggested they meet at a local park in the afternoon, a place where they could walk and talk without the distractions of the city. Layla responded quickly, her excitement barely hidden in her words, and soon they had agreed on the time and place. Both felt a sense of comfort in the familiarity of their routine, yet there was a shared awareness that today might be different. When Ethan arrived, he noticed the subtle beauty of the park, the soft rustling of leaves, the gentle hum of birds, and the sunlight streaming through the branches. It was peaceful, a quiet contrast to his normally bustling world. He found a bench near a fountain and waited, rehearsing in his mind the words he wanted to say, the feelings he wanted to convey. His heart raced, though he tried to calm himself. He had grown accustomed to controlling every aspect of his life, but with Layla, control felt unnecessary. Her presence allowed him to simply be, without expectation or pressure. Layla arrived a few minutes later, her familiar smile immediately lifting the tension he had carried. She waved, and he returned the gesture, feeling the usual flutter of excitement in his chest. They greeted each other warmly, exchanging small pleasantries before beginning their walk along the winding paths of the park. The atmosphere was comfortable, filled with the quiet rhythm of shared footsteps and gentle conversation. As they walked, they spoke about the week, about small victories and challenges, and about moments that had made them pause and reflect. Ethan shared some of the decisions he had made at work, not in the language of power or profit, but in the way he reflected on their impact and meaning. Layla responded with thoughtful questions, showing interest not only in the outcomes but in the values and intentions behind them. Their conversation flowed naturally, deeper and more intimate than before. They paused near a pond, watching ducks glide across the water, and the moment felt suspended in time. Ethan found himself opening up more than he had in weeks, sharing not only work-related experiences but also personal reflections and insecurities. He spoke of moments when he had felt overwhelmed by responsibility, when he had doubted whether he would ever find someone who truly understood him. Layla listened with patience and empathy, offering insights from her own experiences, but never judgment. Layla shared her own moments of vulnerability, revealing fears and uncertainties she had rarely spoken aloud. She spoke of the pressure she sometimes felt to balance her responsibilities, of moments of self-doubt, and of the longing she had for meaningful connection. Ethan was struck by her honesty and strength, and he realized how rare it was to find someone willing to be so open while remaining grounded. He felt a growing admiration for her resilience, her warmth, and her ability to see the world with both hope and clarity. As they continued their walk, the conversation shifted naturally to dreams and aspirations. Ethan spoke of goals he had set for his company, not in terms of profit, but in how he hoped to make a positive difference in the world. Layla shared her dreams of expanding her teaching program, helping more children discover their creativity, and creating spaces where their voices could be heard. They discovered shared values in empathy, dedication, and the desire to contribute to something greater than themselves. Hours passed, though neither noticed. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows and bathing the park in warm, golden light. They paused on a small bridge overlooking a gently flowing stream, the scene quiet and serene. Ethan felt a surge of emotion, the culmination of weeks of connection, laughter, and shared moments. He realized that he could no longer imagine his life without her presence, without the sense of understanding and warmth she brought into it. Layla sensed the change in him, the subtle shift in his demeanor that spoke of feelings deeper than casual affection. She felt her own heart respond in kind, a quiet certainty that the bond between them had grown into something profound. In that moment, words were not necessary. Their shared gaze, the gentle smiles, and the way they lingered in the quiet beauty of the evening spoke volumes. They continued walking, finding a small cafe open late where they could sit and enjoy a simple meal. Over plates of food and steaming cups of tea, their conversation became more personal, exploring the intricacies of their lives and the ways in which their paths had crossed so unexpectedly. Ethan shared stories from his youth, moments of joy and failure alike, and Layla responded with her own reflections, each story building understanding and trust. As the night deepened, they left the cafe and walked through the quiet streets of the city. The lights reflected off the pavement, creating a soft glow around them. Ethan reached for her hand gently, and she accepted it without hesitation. The simple gesture carried the weight of all their shared moments, the laughter, the conversations, the understanding, and the growing affection between them. They paused near a small park bench, sitting side by side in the quiet night. Ethan spoke softly, expressing feelings he had struggled to articulate before. He admitted the loneliness he had felt, the longing for connection, and the way her presence had brought light and hope into his life. Layla listened, her eyes reflecting understanding and warmth, and she shared her own feelings of admiration and hope, acknowledging the profound impact he had made on her own sense of possibility and joy. The moment was tender and unhurried, a culmination of the weeks they had spent building trust and connection. They spoke of future plans, not in terms of grand gestures or dramatic events, but in the quiet promise of shared experiences and mutual support. They envisioned moments of simple joy, walking together, sharing meals, exploring the city, and supporting each other in their respective passions. The conversation was grounded in reality, yet filled with the hope of a shared future. Eventually, they walked toward the edge of the park, where the city lights glimmered on the horizon. Ethan felt a deep sense of gratitude for the way their paths had crossed, for the patience and understanding that had allowed their relationship to grow naturally. Layla felt the same, recognizing that what they had built was rare, a connection rooted in honesty, respect, and genuine care. As they said goodbye that night, there was no rush, no pressure, only a quiet understanding that this was the beginning of a new chapter. Ethan watched her walk away, feeling a profound sense of contentment and anticipation. Layla, turning to glance back, felt the same, a gentle hope settling in her heart that what they had discovered together would continue to flourish. In the days that followed, their connection deepened. They shared small gestures of thoughtfulness, exchanged messages filled with warmth and encouragement, and continued to explore the nuances of each other's personalities. Ethan found himself inspired by her resilience,